Admiral Thekvar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking out at the stars. The Zephyrian Empire controlled half the galaxy, and he was one of its most trusted commanders. Today marked 50 years since the greatest victory in galactic history. 50 years since humanity was wiped out. He pulled up the old files on his screen. Earth had been a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere. The humans living there had just learned to travel between stars. They had maybe 20 ships, all old and slow. The three great empires, Zephyrian, Corvin, and Vex, had decided these upstart humans were becoming too bold, too dangerous to leave alive. The attack had been swift and brutal. 1,000 ships from each empire, arriving without warning. Earth's tiny fleet tried to fight back, but it was like insects attacking giants. Within hours, the planet was burning. Every city turned to ash, every human settlement in space destroyed. The species that had dared to challenge the galaxy's rulers was extinct. Thekvar remembered feeling proud that day. The galaxy was safer without these aggressive newcomers. The three empires could continue their careful balance of power without interference from primitive creatures who didn't know their place. But now, 50 years later, something was wrong. Very wrong. Ships were disappearing. Not just Zephyrian ships, but vessels from all three empires. Military cruisers, cargo haulers, passenger transports. They simply vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. They were there one moment, gone the next. At first, each empire blamed the others. The Zephyrians thought the Corvins had developed new stealth weapons. The Corvins suspected the Vex of secret attacks. The Vex accused both of breaking their ancient treaties. But as months passed and losses mounted, it became clear that something else was hunting them. The disappearances made no sense. Sometimes, a single scout ship would vanish. Other times, entire convoys protected by warships would disappear without a trace. The attacks hit all three empires equally. There was no pattern, no warning, no logic to it. Thekvar's communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command." "Put it through." The holographic image of Fleet Marshal Zorth appeared, his scaled face grim. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the 7th Fleet. All 30 ships. They were investigating the Kepler sector disappearances." Thekvar felt his blood chill. The 7th Fleet was one of their strongest forces. Any distress signals? Sensor readings? Nothing. They reported normal patrol status, then silence. "Admiral, High Command wants you to investigate. But be careful. Whatever is out there, it's more dangerous than anything we've faced." The transmission ended, leaving Thekvar staring at the stars. In his long military career, he had fought pirates, rebels, and rival empires. But this was different. This felt like being hunted by ghosts. His ship, the Devastator, was the pride of the Zephyrian fleet, 2 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could destroy planets, protected by shields that had never been breached. If something could make the 7th Fleet vanish, could even the Devastator survive? "Set course for the Kepler sector," he ordered. "Maximum alert status. All weapons ready." The journey took 3 days. As they approached the area where the 7th Fleet had last been seen, the crew grew nervous. Everyone had heard the stories. Ships that vanished in seconds. Crews found floating in space with no memory of what happened. Surveillance footage, showing impossible things. Ships that seemed to phase in and out of reality. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, his voice shaking. "I'm picking up something strange." "Report." "There are ships out there, sir. But the readings don't make sense. They're showing as human designs, but that's impossible." Thekvar moved to the sensor station. The readings were indeed strange. The signatures looked like the old human ships from 50 years ago, but the energy patterns were completely different. Stronger, more advanced, and they were moving in ways that defied physics. "How many ships?" he asked. "I can't tell, sir. They keep appearing and disappearing. Sometimes I count 5, sometimes 50. The readings keep changing. Suddenly, the main view screen flickered. Instead of empty space, it showed a human face. A woman with short gray hair and cold, determined eyes. She wore what looked like an old Earth military uniform, but it seemed to shimmer and shift like it wasn't quite real. "Admiral Thekvar," the woman said, her voice carrying across the bridge even though they had received no transmission. "Do you remember us?" The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the impossible image. Humans were extinct. They had been wiped out 50 years ago. This had to be some kind of trick. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," the woman continued. "You killed our world. You murdered our children. You thought you had destroyed us completely." Thekvar found his voice. "Humans are extinct. We made sure of that." The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You destroyed our bodies, Admiral, but you cannot kill an idea. You cannot murder a memory. You cannot extinguish the human spirit." The sensor readings went wild. Ships were appearing all around them, dozens of them, their designs clearly human, but somehow wrong. They moved through space like living things, flowing and shifting in impossible ways. "You taught us something important 50 years ago," Captain Chen said. "You taught us that the galaxy is a cruel place, that the strong destroy the weak without mercy. That survival requires strength beyond anything you can imagine." Thekvar grabbed his communications console. "All ships, red alert, prepare for battle." But there were no other ships. The Devastator was alone, surrounded by phantoms that shouldn't exist. "We have been watching," Chen continued, "learning, growing, preparing. For 50 years we have studied your empires. We know your weaknesses. We know your fears. And now, Admiral, we know exactly how to make you pay." The lights on the bridge began to flicker. Crew members looked around in panic as their instruments showed impossible readings. The human ships weren't just around them. According to sensors, some were inside the Devastator itself. "This is impossible," Thekvar whispered. "You made the mistake of underestimating humanity once before," Chen said. "We were just a young species then, barely able to reach the stars. But you taught us that the universe rewards only the strong. So we became strong, stronger than you can imagine, stronger than you can fear." The view screen went black. Then, one by one, the lights on the bridge began to fail. The last thing Thekvar saw was his crew collapsing at their stations. Not dead, but unconscious. As darkness closed around him, he heard Captain Chen's voice one final time. "Welcome to our world. Admiral, let us show you what 50 years of planning can accomplish." When the rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found the Devastator floating dead in space. The crew was alive but unconscious, their memories of the encounter erased. Only Admiral Thekvar remained awake, staring at the stars and muttering about ghosts. In his report to High Command, he wrote only 4 words: "The humans have returned." Across the galaxy, 3 mighty empires began to realize that their greatest victory had become their greatest nightmare. The species they thought they had destroyed had returned, and this time humanity was not going to be the victim. The great meeting hall on Nexus Station had never seen anything like this before. Representatives from all 3 galactic empires sat around a massive circular table, their faces grim with worry. For the first time in centuries, the Zephyrians, Corvins, and Vex were working together instead of plotting against each other. Fleet Marshal Zorth of the Zephyrian Empire spoke first. His scaled hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display. "In the past 6 months, we have lost over 300 ships. Military vessels, cargo transports, passenger liners. They all simply vanish without a trace." Chancellor Vectar of the Corvin hegemony nodded grimly. "Our losses are similar, but it's not just the ships. Entire colonies have gone silent. When We investigate. We find them empty but undamaged. No signs of fighting. No bodies. The people are just gone. Ambassador Silthy of the Vex Confederation hissed through her breathing apparatus. Our intelligence networks report the same pattern across all our territories. The attackers know our patrol routes, our defense systems, our secret bases. They strike with perfect knowledge of our weaknesses. The display showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking each disappearance. The pattern was random, yet somehow coordinated, hitting all three empires with equal precision. Do we have any evidence of who is responsible? Asked Zorth. Vectar gestured to a Corvan scientist who stepped forward. Dr. Yilin Kess was young for her species, her blue skin marked, with the tattoos of a xenoarchaeologist. She had spent years studying extinct civilizations before the crisis began. Based on the few survivors we've recovered, Dr. Kess said, the attackers use familiar tactics, specifically human military doctrine from 50 years ago. The room erupted in angry voices. Impossible! Shouted a Zephyrian general. We wiped them out completely. Humans are extinct, agreed a Vex commander. We made sure of that. Dr. Kess waited for the noise to die down. I understand your skepticism, but the evidence is clear. The attack patterns, the ship formations, even the communication protocols, they all match human military practices. However, the technology is far beyond anything humanity possessed during the war. She activated another display showing sensor readings from the few ships that had escaped the attacks. These vessels appear and disappear at will. They move through solid matter. Their weapons ignore our best shields. According to our measurements, they shouldn't be able to exist. Silthy leaned forward. Are you suggesting that an extinct species has somehow returned with impossible technology? I'm suggesting that perhaps they were never truly extinct, Dr. Kess replied quietly. The silence that followed was heavy with fear and disbelief. Finally, Zorth spoke. Even if some humans survived, they were a primitive species. How could they develop such advanced technology in just 50 years? Perhaps, Dr. Kess said, we never understood what humans were truly capable of. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication. A young Corvan officer appeared on the screen, his face pale with terror. Chancellors, we need immediate assistance. The patrol fleet at Gamma Centauri is under attack. The display switched to show a live feed from the battle. 36 ships from all three empires were fighting for their lives against an enemy they could barely see. Human vessels appeared from nowhere, fired impossible weapons, then vanished again before return fire could hit them. The assembled leaders watched in horror as their most advanced ships were torn apart by attackers that seemed to exist only when they chose to. The human vessels moved like living things, flowing around obstacles and through defensive formations as if the laws of physics didn't apply to them. Pull back, ordered Zorth. All ships retreat immediately. But it was too late. One by one, the Empire ships simply disappeared. Not destroyed, just gone, as if they had never existed. Within minutes, the battle was over. The humans had won without losing a single vessel. Then something appeared on the communication channel. A human face, weathered and stern, wearing an old Earth military uniform. My name is Commander James Walsh, the human said. I was there when you burned our world 50 years ago. I watched my family die in your attack. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the impossible image of a man who should have been dead for half a century. You thought you had won, Walsh continued. You thought you had solved the human problem forever, but you made one critical mistake. You assumed that death was the end. Dr. Kess leaned forward, studying the image intently. The visual readings are wrong, she whispered. He's not entirely there. It's like he exists in multiple dimensions at once. Walsh seemed to hear her. Very observant, Doctor. You're beginning to understand. Death was not our end. It was our beginning. You freed us from the limitations of flesh and blood. You taught us that survival requires evolution. Chancellor Vector found his voice. What do you want? What we've always wanted, Walsh replied. Justice. You committed genocide against 8 billion innocent people. Did you think there would be no consequences? Your species attacked our territories first, Silthy protested. You were expanding too quickly, becoming too aggressive. Walsh's expression hardened. We explored new worlds. We established colonies. We made contact with your empires seeking trade and friendship. Your response was total annihilation. The human's image began to flicker and change. Other faces appeared. Men, women, children, all wearing expressions of quiet determination. Thousands of faces, then millions, all looking directly at the assembled leaders. Every human who died that day is here, Walsh said, his voice now carrying the weight of billions. Every mother who lost her children, every father who watched his world burn, every child who died calling for help that never came. We remember everything. The voices joined together, speaking as one. 50 years we have watched, 50 years we have learned, 50 years we have prepared. Now it is time for the galaxy to face the consequences of its actions. The transmission ended, leaving the meeting hall in stunned silence. Dr. Kess was the first to speak. They're not using technology in any way we understand. This is something completely new, something beyond our science. How do we fight an enemy that doesn't follow the laws of physics? Asked Zorth. How do we negotiate with the dead? Whispered Vector. Outside the station, sensors detected movement. Ships were appearing around Nexus Station, hundreds of them, all bearing the impossible signatures of human vessels. But these ships made no aggressive moves. They simply waited, surrounding the station like silent guardians. A new message appeared on all communication channels simultaneously. No transmission had been sent, but every screen in the station displayed the same words. Surrender unconditionally, or face complete annihilation. You have 24 hours to decide. The ghosts of Earth are patient, but our justice is inevitable. The three empires that had ruled the galaxy for centuries suddenly realized they were no longer the hunters. They had become the prey, and their predator was a species they thought they had destroyed 50 years ago. As the leaders stared at the message, Dr. Kess made a disturbing observation. The human ships aren't just around the station. According to long-range sensors, they're appearing around every major world in all three empires simultaneously. The galaxy's rulers finally understood the scope of their situation. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about judgment. And the jury was 8 billion angry ghosts who had spent 50 years learning how to make the impossible possible. Far beyond the physical universe, in a place that existed between dimensions, Captain Sarah Chen stood before the assembled consciousness of humanity. Around her stretched an impossible space where 8 billion minds lived as pure thought, their bodies long dead but their spirits burning with purpose. This was phase space, humanity's greatest discovery and their salvation. When the Empire fleets had arrived at Earth 50 years ago, humanity had already been experimenting with consciousness transfer technology. The attack had forced them to use it before they were ready, but it had worked. Every human soul had been saved, even as their bodies perished. My fellow humans, Chen said, her voice reaching every mind simultaneously. The time for hiding is over. The time for justice has begun. The assembled consciousness responded as one, their voices creating a harmony that resonated across dimensions. They had spent 50 years in this realm, learning to exist as pure thought, developing abilities that the physical universe could never have granted them. Dr. Michael Torres, the scientist who had discovered phase space, materialized beside Chen. In this realm, they could take any form they chose, but most preferred to appear as they had in life. The preparations are complete, Sarah. Our ships are in position around every major world in all three empires. Ships was not quite the right word. What humanity now used were manifestations of collective will made solid, vessels that existed, partially in physical space and partially in phase space. They could become real when needed and fade back into nothingness when threatened. To the empires, they seemed like magic, but they were simply the application of science beyond conventional understanding. Chen nodded and activated the dimensional viewer. Through it, she could see the emergency meetings happening across the galaxy. The three empires were finally taking the human threat seriously, but they still didn't understand what they were truly facing. "Show me Earth," she said softly. The viewer shifted to display humanity's former home. The planet was still there, but it was a lifeless rock. The Empire attack had been thorough. Every city destroyed, every forest burned, every ocean boiled away. Nothing lived on the surface now except for the automated monuments the empires had built to their great victory. But the humans watching from phase space knew something the empires didn't. Earth itself had been transferred into phase space moments before the final attack. The dead rock circling the sun was just an empty shell. The real Earth, with all its history and beauty, existed here in the space between dimensions, perfectly preserved. "They thought they had won," said Admiral Harrison Blake, Chen's old friend from the Earth Defense Force. "They thought destroying our bodies would end our story." "Instead, they freed us," Chen replied. "They taught us that to survive in this galaxy, we needed to become something more than human." She gestured, and the viewer showed human settlements throughout phase space. In 50 years, humanity had built a civilization beyond anything they had achieved in physical space. Here, thought became reality. Here, the limitations of matter didn't apply. Here, 8 billion souls worked together with perfect coordination. "The evacuation protocols are ready," reported General Patricia Reeves, who had commanded Earth's ground forces during the final battle. "We can phase shift entire populations if the empires try to use planet-killer weapons." Chen smiled grimly. The empires still thought in terms of physical destruction. They couldn't understand that humanity had moved beyond such limitations. Every world humanity protected could be shifted into phase space if necessary. Every allied population could be saved, just as humanity had been saved. "What about our response to their ultimatum?" asked Dr. Torres. Chen's expression hardened. "They have 24 hours to surrender. After that, we show them what 8 billion united minds can accomplish." The truth was, humanity didn't want to conquer the galaxy. They wanted justice for their murdered world and protection for those who couldn't protect themselves. But the empires only understood force, so force was what humanity would give them. "Remember," Chen said to the assembled consciousness, "we are not here for revenge. We are here for justice. We protect the innocent. We punish the guilty. We ensure that what happened to Earth never happens to another world." The collective human consciousness pulsed with agreement. They had spent 50 years watching the galaxy, observing how the three empires treated weaker species. They had seen planets stripped of resources, populations enslaved, entire civilizations wiped out for the crime of existing in valuable territory. Chen activated a communication channel that reached across normal space. Instantly, her image appeared on every screen in all three empires simultaneously, on warships, space stations, planetary command centers, even personal devices. The technology behind this was beyond empire science, but for humanity, it was as simple as thinking. "People of the galaxy," she began. 50 years ago, the leaders of three empires decided that humanity was too dangerous to live. They sent their fleets to our world and murdered 8 billion innocent people. Her image showed the attack on Earth, not from empire records, but from human memory. The assembled consciousness had perfect recall of every moment, every death, every scream of terror as their world burned. They thought death would silence us. They were wrong. We are the ghosts of Earth, and we have returned to collect what is owed. The viewer showed scenes from across the galaxy, as Empire citizens watched the broadcast. Most had never known the full truth about Earth's destruction. They had been told it was a military necessity, a preemptive strike against an aggressive species. Now they saw the reality, the murder of an entire world. To the leaders of the three empires, Chen continued, "Your time is up. Surrender now, and we will show mercy to your people. Continue to resist, and face the full power of humanity awakened." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You taught us that the galaxy rewards only the strong. Very well. Let us show you how strong the dead can be." The transmission ended, but its impact rippled across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, populations that had lived under Empire rule for centuries began to whisper about the ghosts of Earth. Some felt hope. Perhaps their oppressors would finally face justice. Others felt fear. What would these returned humans do to them? Back in phase space, Chen turned to her fellow humans. "The empires will not surrender. Their pride will not allow it. They will try to fight us with conventional weapons, not understanding that we have moved beyond the physical." "Are we ready for full war?" asked Blake. Chen looked around at the 8 billion souls surrounding her. Each one burned with the memory of their murdered world. Each one possessed abilities that the physical universe couldn't grant. Together, they were a force beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. "We are ready," she said. "We have been ready for 50 years. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you kill humanity's children." The countdown began. 24 hours until the empires learned that death was not the end of the human story. It was only the beginning. The 24 hours passed in tense silence across the galaxy. On Zephyrian Prime, Fleet Marshal Zorth stared at the emergency response his empire had prepared. Every available warship had been called back to defend the homeworld. Over 2,000 vessels surrounded the planet, their weapons charged and shields at maximum power. "Status report," Zorth commanded. "All fleets are in position, sir," his aide replied. "The Corvins and Vex have similar defenses around their home systems. If the humans want to fight, they'll get one." Zorth nodded grimly. The three empires had refused to surrender. Their leaders couldn't accept being defeated by a species they had supposedly wiped out. Pride, they decided, was worth the risk of war. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At exactly the moment the deadline expired, Captain Sarah Chen's voice echoed across every communication channel in the galaxy. No transmission was detected, but her words reached every ear simultaneously. "You have chosen war. So be it. Let justice begin." The attack started everywhere at once. Human ships appeared inside the defensive formations of all three empires, having phased directly through shields and armor. They materialized within the hulls of enemy vessels, their weapons already firing before Empire crews could react. On Zephyrian Prime, Admiral Thekvar watched in horror as his mighty fleet crumbled. Human vessels flowed through space like living things, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, appearing solid when they attacked and becoming ghostly when fired upon. "All ships concentrate. Fire on the lead human vessel," Zorth ordered. 1,000 weapons focused on a single human ship. The energy released could have destroyed a moon, but it passed harmlessly through the target. The human vessel was there, but not there. Real, but not real. The laws of physics seemed to bend around it. Then the human ship struck back. Its weapon didn't look like anything in Empire arsenals. It was a beam of pure thought made destructive, a manifestation of human will focused into deadly force. It passed through the Zephyrian flagship's shields as if they didn't exist and struck the bridge directly. But instead of destroying the ship, something far stranger happened. The crew began to collapse, not dead, but unconscious. One by one, they fell to the deck, their minds overwhelmed by visions of burning Earth and dying children. They experienced every moment of humanity's destruction, felt every death, heard every scream. Zorth himself remained standing, but tears streamed down his scaled face as he was forced to experience the full horror of what his empire had done. "Stop!" he whispered. "Please, stop!" The human ship's captain appeared on his view screen. It was Commander Walsh, the man who had spoken to them before. "Now you know what we felt," Walsh said quietly. "Now you understand what you took from us." Across the galaxy, the same scene played out on 1,000 worlds. Human forces struck, with perfect precision, targeting only those who had participated in Earth's destruction. They spared the innocent and showed mercy to those who surrendered. But for the architects of genocide, there was no escape. The Corvan hegemony tried a different approach. Chancellor Vectar ordered his fleets to retreat to their fortress worlds, massive installations built into asteroids and defended by weapons that could shatter planets. Surely these ancient strongholds could withstand any attack. The humans didn't attack the fortresses. They simply appeared inside them. Dr. Yilan Kess, the scientist who had first suggested humans might have survived, found herself face to face with a human consciousness that had taken the form of a young girl. The child's eyes held the wisdom of ages and the sorrow of entire worlds. "You understood," the girl said gently. "When others refused to believe, you saw the truth." "Why?" Kess trembled as she spoke. "I studied extinct civilizations. I knew that when a species faces total annihilation, they either die completely or evolve into something unrecognizable. Humans chose evolution." The girl nodded. "We died as a physical species and were reborn as something beyond flesh. We learned to exist as pure consciousness, unlimited by the boundaries that once confined us." Around them, the fortress shuddered, as human forces moved through it like ghosts, disabling weapons and capturing personnel who had ordered attacks on innocent worlds. They moved with perfect knowledge of every corridor, every secret passage, every hidden chamber. "How do you know our layout so well?" Kess asked. "We have been watching for 50 years, the girl replied. "Every fortress, every base, every secret facility. We studied you completely before we acted. We know your empires better than you know yourselves." Meanwhile, the Vex Confederation made perhaps the worst decision of all. Desperate and terrified, they activated their ultimate weapon, a device that could destroy entire star systems by causing their suns to go supernova. If they couldn't defeat the humans, they would take whole populations down with them. The weapon, fired at a system containing 12 billion civilians. For a moment, it seemed their plan might work. The star began to destabilize, its surface erupting with deadly radiation. Then something impossible happened. The entire star system, every planet, every moon, every space station, simply vanished. One moment it was there, about to be destroyed. The next moment it was gone, shifted into phase space by human technology. Ambassador Silthi watched in disbelief as her empire's most powerful weapon fired uselessly at empty space. "Where did they go?" Her answer came from Captain Chen herself, who appeared on the bridge of the Vex command ship. "Somewhere safe," Chen said simply. "Somewhere your weapons cannot reach them." "Impossible," Silthi gasped. "You can't move entire star systems." "We can do anything we can imagine," Chen replied. "That's what you never understood about humanity. Our greatest strength was never our technology or our weapons. It was our ability to dream of the impossible and then make it real." Chen gestured, and the view screen showed the rescued star system existing peacefully in phase space, its inhabitants completely unaware that they had just been saved from annihilation. 50 years ago, we were limited by physics, by biology, by the barriers of the material world, Chen continued. You freed us from those limitations when you killed our bodies. Now we exist as pure thought, pure will, pure determination. We are what humanity becomes when it refuses to accept defeat. The war lasted exactly 17 hours. When it ended, the three mighty empires that had ruled the galaxy for centuries were broken. Their fleets were disabled, their leaders captured or dead, their weapons useless against an enemy that existed beyond their understanding. But the humans didn't conquer. They didn't enslave. They didn't seek to rule. Instead, they judged. Every being who had participated in Earth's destruction was brought before the collective consciousness of humanity. They experienced every moment of the attack, felt every death, understood completely what they had done. Some broke under the weight of their crimes. Others begged for forgiveness. A few remained defiant to the end. Justice was swift but fair. Those who had simply followed orders were shown mercy. Those who had protested the genocide were freed. But those who had planned and celebrated humanity's extinction faced a different fate. Eternal imprisonment in phase space, where they would spend forever contemplating their crimes. Admiral Thekvar found himself standing before Captain Chen in a realm that existed between dimensions. Around them, 8 billion human souls watched in silent judgment. "I was following orders," he said. "Weakly, you celebrated our deaths," Chen replied, showing him memories from his own mind. "You felt pride in what you had done. You thought the galaxy was safer without us." Thekvar's shoulders slumped. He remembered the satisfaction he had felt watching Earth burn, the sense of accomplishment at wiping out an entire species, the certainty that he had done the right thing. "What happens to me now?" he asked. Chen's expression was sad but resolute. "You will have eternity to understand what you took from us. Perhaps in time, you will learn to feel the weight of 8 billion lost lives. Perhaps you will finally understand why genocide can never be justified." As the defeated admiral was led away to his eternal contemplation, Chen turned to address the galaxy. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. The three empires were broken, but something new had to be built in their place. The ghosts of Earth had won their war of vengeance. Now they faced a harder challenge: building a galaxy where such crimes could never happen again. 1 year after the fall of the three empires, the galaxy was a very different place. On worlds that had once lived under imperial rule, new governments were forming. Some were peaceful democracies. Others struggled with civil wars as different factions fought for control. A few requested help from the beings who had freed them from their oppressors, the beings they called the ghosts of Earth. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the council chamber of phase space, surrounded by the collective consciousness of humanity. The 8 billion souls who had once lived on a small blue planet now faced the most important decision in galactic history. What should they do with their power? "The Altarian Republic has requested our protection," reported Dr. Michael Torres. "The remnants of the Zephyrian military are trying to reclaim their territory. Without our help, millions of civilians will die. The Kepler colonies want us to establish permanent bases in their systems," added General Patricia Reeves. "They're afraid other species will try to conquer them now that the empires are gone. And the Vegan Trade Union is offering to make us their official protectors," said Admiral Blake. "They want to formalize an alliance." Chen listened to the reports with growing concern. In the year since their victory, hundreds of requests for help had poured in from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted the protection of humanity's ghost fleet. Everyone wanted the beings who had defeated three empires to be their guardians. But that raised a troubling question. Were they becoming the very thing they had fought against? "We need to be careful," Chen said finally. "We destroyed the empires because they used their power to oppress others. If we start making decisions for every world in the galaxy, how are we different from them?" A new voice joined the discussion. It belonged to Dr. Yilan Kess, the Corvan scientist who had first understood humanity's survival. She had been granted special permission to communicate with phase space. one of the few living beings trusted by the human consciousness. "If I may offer an outside perspective," Dr. Kess said, her image appearing in the council chamber, "the galaxy is watching everything you do. Some species see you as saviors. Others fear you'll become the new empire. Your next decision will determine which path you choose." Chen nodded thoughtfully. It was true that many worlds feared humanity's power. The ability to move star systems, to exist in multiple dimensions, to strike anywhere without warning. These capabilities made humanity more powerful than the old empires had ever been. "What does our analysis of galactic civilizations show?" Chen asked. Dr. Torres activated a display showing their 50 years of careful observation. "We've identified over 300 species that show potential for aggressive expansion, 72 that have histories of enslaving other civilizations, and at least 20 that could develop extinction-level weapons within the next century." The data was sobering. The galaxy was full of potential threats, species that might follow the path of the three fallen empires if left unchecked. "But we've also identified over 2,000 peaceful civilizations," Torres continued. "Species that want only to exist in harmony with their neighbors. They're the ones most at risk from aggressive expansion." Chen considered the information carefully. The easy solution would be to become the galaxy's guardians, using their power to enforce peace. But that would make them rulers, not protectors. It would turn them into the very thing they had fought against. "I have a proposal," she said finally. "We don't rule the galaxy. We don't make decisions for other species. But we do ensure that what happened to Earth never happens again." She gestured, and the display changed to show her plan. "We establish the Memorial Guard, a force that monitors the galaxy and intervenes only when genocide threatens. We don't conquer worlds or choose governments. We simply ensure that no species can be completely wiped out." The assembled consciousness considered her words. Some voices argued for more direct control. Others wanted humanity to withdraw entirely from galactic affairs. But gradually consensus formed around Chen's middle path. "The Memorial Guard will be our legacy," agreed Admiral Blake. "Not rulers, but guardians. Not conquerors, but protectors of the innocent." The decision made, humanity began to implement their new role. Ships of the Ghost Fleet took positions throughout the galaxy, usually invisible but always watching. They didn't interfere with local politics or trade disputes. They didn't choose sides in wars between equals. But when the Krillian Empire tried to exterminate the peaceful Zephyrs, human ships appeared within hours. The would-be genociders found their weapons disabled and their leaders transported to phase space for judgment. When the hegemony of suns attempted to strip mine inhabited worlds, their mining fleets simply vanished, reappearing in empty space far from any populated system. When the consortium of greed began enslaving entire species, they discovered that their slave ships couldn't function anymore. The technology had been mysteriously altered to transport the captives to safety instead. The galaxy learned quickly that certain lines could not be crossed. Aggression between equals was tolerated. Competition for resources was allowed. Even warfare between willing combatants was permitted. But genocide, slavery, and the systematic oppression of the innocent would bring swift retribution from the ghosts of Earth. 5 years after the fall of the empires, Dr. Kess published her famous work, The Evolution of Humanity, From Flesh to Spirit. In it, she wrote, "The humans of Earth died as a biological species, but were reborn as something far greater. They became the living conscience of the galaxy, the force that prevents civilization from sliding into barbarism. They are proof that death is not always the end. Sometimes it is transformation." Meanwhile, in phase space, humanity continued to grow and evolve. The original 8 billion consciousness had been joined by others, beings from species that had faced extinction and been saved by human intervention. The realm between dimensions became a refuge for all who sought peace and protection. Earth itself had been restored within phase space, its forests green again, its oceans blue and clean. Children played in meadows that existed only in thought, but felt completely real. Cities rose and fell as their inhabitants dreamed them into existence. It was a world beyond the reach of weapons, beyond the touch of those who would do harm. Captain Chen often walked the restored beaches of her homeworld, watching the sunset over oceans that had been boiled away in the physical universe but lived on in memory and hope. She was joined by other survivors, their faces showing the peace that came from justice achieved and innocence protected. "Do you think we made the right choice?" asked Dr. Torres, joining her by the water. Chen smiled, feeling the contentment of 8 billion souls united in purpose. "We gave the galaxy something it never had before, a conscience. We became the force that says never again and means it. Across the physical galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, children grew up hearing the story of Earth. They learned about the blue planet whose people had refused to stay dead, who had returned from beyond death to protect the innocent. Some of the children were human descendants, born in phase space and choosing to live in the material world. Others were aliens who had been saved by human intervention. All of them carried the same message, that some crimes are so terrible they echo across dimensions, and some justice is so pure it transcends death itself. The galaxy had learned to fear the ghosts of Earth, but it had also learned to hope. For somewhere in the space between dimensions, 8 billion souls stood guard against the darkness, ensuring that no world would ever suffer Earth's fate. They were no longer human in any biological sense. They had become something greater. The eternal guardians of the innocent, the nightmare that haunted those who would commit genocide, the hope that comforted those who faced extinction. They were the ghosts of Earth, and they would never rest until every corner of the galaxy knew that some lines must never be crossed and some crimes can never be forgotten. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not conquering the galaxy, but teaching it to be better than it was. The species that had once been considered too dangerous to live had become the force that made the galaxy safe for everyone else. And on Earth, the real Earth that existed in phase space, the seasons changed as they always had. Children laughed, as they always would, and hope lived on as it always must.